Anyway, so here we go on Direct Mail Ain't Dead. And, I was talking about doing a webinar on mail, and one of my friends said, isn't it time to abolish United States Postal Service? And I know that there's some, if you're from the USPS, just put USPS in the comments. Try that out. Test it. But I know that there were quite a few registered, and he said, isn't it time we abolish? And he actually, at the time, he was running for governor of the state of Wisconsin. So, he wasn't just some bar friend, but he's actually a fairly legitimate person. But he had this perspective that, digital is so great and so overpowering that there's no point to the USPS anymore. And I want to tell you that I'm a huge fan. I wave at the little trucks that go by every time I see them. I ride my motorcycle to work, and I'm always waving and they're starting to wave back, so that's great. But no, USPS is a great institution, and we not only need it, but there's some great advantages. So today there'll be a little bit of, I'll kind of move in and out of speaking CFO. I covered a really good article a couple of days ago about how marketers are experiencing budget cuts, and for a CFO, you may not realize this, but for a CFO, marketing and advertising are an expense item. On a P&L, there's no necessary connection between spending money on marketing and advertising and driving sales. They look at sales as revenue, and there's two sections of your P&L. There's a expense section and there's a revenue section. And actually, usually they put the revenue up at the top. And they have no way of knowing whether there's a connection or not. But they know that if sales are down, they have to cut expenses. Well, that's the way they think, right? They don't realize that if they just cut all their marketing and advertising, the sales may never come back. And they always have a really, clear view. Western Publishing, years ago, was Little Golden Books, if you've ever heard of those, was one of the biggest publishing companies in America. And they would send out books for free and hope you paid for them. And one of the finance guys said, we're not collecting on a lot of these books. I mean, they're very small and cost a lot. He said, I wonder if we could do an analysis and see where the people who don't pay for books are. And so they ranked zip codes, and they decided just not to mail books to the top 20% where people don't pay. And it worked so well, they did it again the next year. So now they've cut 40% out, and suddenly the warehouse started getting too big. The sales started going down dramatically. I'm not saying that they couldn't have done it something, but this is how CFOs think. When it's a crisis, like now, we got to cut costs. And so I saw something yesterday, 40% of marketing budgets are being cut, something like that. And when you're in this situation, you have to understand what your CFO and your CEO are looking for. So we're going to talk today a little bit about what the CEO wants. We're going to talk about how mail is in a unique position to drive this, and how machine learning in a direct marketing culture can change the valuation of your company, can dramatically improve your situation, because we've seen it happen over and over through many recessions and, been through a lot. What the CEO wants is return on investment, and they want company valuation. What that means, basically boiled down for marketing people, is they want to know what the company would be worth if they sold it. A lot of companies have investors that have been with them for a long time, and they're just hoping that they can get they can get some growth going, because valuation can be affected by some really interesting things. One is, of course, the profitability and the sales. There's well-known multiples where you take the sales times 10% or 10 times, I'm sorry, you take the profits times 5 or 10 times. You take the sales times 1 or 2 times. I mean, not very much. Because sales may not be worth very much. You might actually be losing money. But then there's sort of an intangible, an enthusiasm aspect. And some of the things we're going to talk about today have that kind of impact, where they can multiply the valuation by 2, 3, 5 times. And that's what the CEO is after. They're after both of these. They're after return on investment. They would love to see advertising prove itself. They would love to see $1 spent on advertising and $1.10 return on investment. That's what they're looking for. And I'm not talking about $1.10 in sales. I'm talking about $10 in sales, which gives you $3 in profits. That's a 300% ROI. That's the kind of way that marketers need to think. They need to understand this is how your CFO is thinking. Does that make any sense? Is anybody with me here? When I started in direct mail, we ran pro formas. In fact, I guess I invented a little spreadsheet formula for figuring out the return on investment on a mailing. And we did that because one of my clients said, we're spending a couple of $1 million to create a catalog company. What are the chances it makes money? Now, there's a book out, and I mean, there was a book out at the time by Freeman Godson Jr. Thanks, Dave. That's Dave Scott, I'm guessing, right? And he said, if a consultant ever tells you what a mailing might do, what the results might be, you should run away. Don't listen to him, because nobody can tell. Nobody can predict the future. Nobody can tell what's going to happen. But, I started thinking about it. It was a great question. I said, we already know how many pieces we're targeting. We got a budget for the number of pieces. We know the cost per piece. We know the industry average order size. We know the cost of order processing, because we were going to process the orders. We didn't know the response rate. We didn't know the average order size, but we knew, we could figure out if it was unreasonable or not. So when Blockbuster came to me and wanted to do a mailing or do a catalog, and they offered me 6 figures to do the consulting on it, I said, tell me which of these numbers, the number 2 guy flew up. Tell me which of these numbers you can change, and I'll tell you that I'll do it. He said, those numbers look pretty good. And so I actually was down there in Fort Lauderdale a couple of years later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and I asked Kerry if he wanted to get together, and he said, sure, that'd be great. So he bought me lunch, and he said, you're the weirdest consultant I've ever seen, walking away from 6 figures, but we just shut the doors this morning before you called, and we lost $5 million, and you were absolutely right. So you got to think a little more like a CEO, got to think a little more like a CFO, and we're going to talk about that today. Now, I've been watching the digital revolution literally 25 years. I built my first website in 1995, and I've seen 2 main paths. I've seen keep mailing and pray, hope that it, hope that it blows over, hope that the digital is just a passing fancy. That wasn't the greatest strategy. I've also seen all-in digital delusion, I call that. I made a hashtag the other day, hashtag digital delusion, which is that digital can fully replace your acquisition strategy and your customer reactivation and maintenance, that it can do it all. I just haven't seen it work, but I still see people going down those paths today. I see Nordstrom's, this was just a year and a month ago or something, where on the investor call, Eric Nordstrom said results were hurt by stopping our use of direct mail. And he talked about how they weren't going to make their numbers in the second quarter because they just decided that their longtime buyers didn't need a coupon in the mail to come to the store. They would just send them an email or try and get them a banner ad or something else. Jill, Linda Heasley, same kind of thing, almost the same within a week or two, said, we plan some shift from direct mail to alternative media options, primarily digital. In hindsight, we moved too much too soon. Now, I didn't hear him say we should go back. I went looking around on their website, and I couldn't find one image of their catalog on their website. It's like they hated the catalog. It was unbelievable. They just, it's like in Egypt where they chiseled the names off the tombs. Let their name be struck from all monuments. We aren't a catalog company anymore. I heard a really interesting presentation at NMOA a couple of years ago where I wish I knew the name of the presenter, and I probably could have found it, but basically she said, we wanted to attract younger women, so we killed the catalog and moved to digital, and after 2 or 3 years, we saw it was a huge mistake. And they, I watched Wayfair talk about how they decided to go into the catalog business and made a lot of mistakes. It's a lot of fun. But the point is that mail has some things to offer that even the catalog industry is ignoring. I did a presentation similar to this called Why Mail about 2 years ago now, and most of the audience was 30-ish. Most of them had MBAs in marketing, and we talked for an hour after with questions. We went 2 hours at a local pub, and they all said to me, we never heard one lecture. After undergrad in marketing, MBA in marketing, we never heard one lecture talking about the benefits of mail. So is it any wonder that now these young people are becoming director of marketing or VP of marketing or CMO, and the CFO is saying we got to cut costs, and somebody's saying, what are we doing spending millions of dollars on these catalogs? It sounds pretty reasonable to me, I have to say. It is reasonable. And if you're a marketing person, you got to understand how reasonable it is. It's just wrong. So let's talk about some digital challenges. A couple of years ago, Procter Gamble slashed its digital ad spend. Not only did nothing bad happen, according to Martech today, sales went up. There's been some follow-up articles. Now, part of that was that it was the way they were allocating their ad dollars. It's very difficult to allocate ad dollars direct or proportionally. What is really generating the sales? Very difficult to say. And partly because most marketers don't think like a CFO. This is from Content Marketing Magazine. 30% of the marketers they surveyed, and there was a couple of thousand in this, 30% said that they 57% said they believed that their content marketing, their social media marketing increased sales, but only 30 said they measured sales impact. They had a way of measuring. This is the kind of the world we're in digital, believe it or not. It's not uncommon. I have more personal stories, but I probably better not share them. Okay, the other issue is ad fraud, and I cited this study back last a year or two in that Why Mail, but 2019 dollars lost to ad fraud increased 21% versus 2018, 21%. And I did a talk today on my live stream about new techniques that are being invented in digital ad fraud, how they're creating apps that look legitimate to Amazon and Apple and Roku, and they're inflating their ad dollars. They're not showing in the ads to any people. They're bots, and it's not going away. Estimated to be $100 billion by 2023.
Digital ads have overtaken all other forms of advertising, promising to measure views and effectiveness more accurately. But is that really the case?
I may be alone here, but I would say digital advertising is not very effective. I would say it has the opportunity to be super effective, but today I would say that oftentimes it's not even as effective as buying television or print or outdoor. So for example, when we buy television, every time you pay for an ad, it actually appears in the program, believe it or not. Whereas digital, if you buy an ad, it may never have a chance to be on the screen. So check for television. Measuring audience, some sort of panel is used and the households are vetted. And there aren't fake households, they're real households. Whereas digital, you've got this problem with bots and you might be targeting bots instead of real people. So the reality is with digital, we now are buying ads that have no chance of working because they're not in view, because they're fraudulent, because they're on content that's harmful for a brand. And in that case, what we're actually saying is there's now a negative part to that X graph that never existed before. And so that whole curve shifted over. So now, instead of half your ads having a chance to work, it's a fraction of your ads have a chance to work.
Something to think about. We don't talk about it too much. It's too scary. Digital ad fraud is second only to drugs for organized crime revenue, according to the World Federation of Advertising. There was a great article today I covered, and I wrote to Martin. I asked him how to pronounce his last name. It looks to me like Keen, but it could be Kin. And he was talking today. It was an article that was published today on the Drum. He said 2/3 of ad spending is going to the walled gardens, the Google, the Facebook, the Amazon. That's where the growth is, in fact. They're growing faster than people are keeping up. And none of them let you see the real ID logs. None of them let you see who they're showing your ad to. Okay? So when you get an order, now granted, you can take an order through their platform, and you know it's a good way to start, because at least then you have some kind of correspondence between who sees the ad, but you don't know who. And that's whose computer or phone the ad appears on. It doesn't mean anybody saw it, right? It could be a bot. You know, every now and then Twitter knocks off tens of thousands of people, just bots. So without this, Martin says, marketers can't build real multi-touch attribution. You can't even build it. And Google, he quoted Google, who says experiments should play an important part of an advertiser's attribution strategy. Google said, we're not going to tell you. We don't know who's really seeing it. And if if they click a link and go to your landing page or something else, then you've really lost track. Now, I'm not saying there is no effect and there is no impact of digital. You know, somebody wrote me and said, you sound like you're really negative on digital. I'm not at all. I'm just saying it's a little like TV. It's a lot like TV. Put an ad on. I worked for an ad agency for a couple of years. And I said, well, direct marketing, that's all about generating a measurable response. And they said, well, we generate measurable responses. They said, we run TV ads and more traffic in the stores, sales go up. Why isn't that direct marketing? It was really a great question. Our creative director asked me that. And it prompted me to push that definition of direct marketing a lot further. Because direct marketing has the capability, if done well, of isolating causal variables. And in fact, that's where this section comes on. Martin says the goal is actually to isolate the causal variables. But it's extremely difficult in digital, just as it is in TV. You're not sure exactly who sees it. You get orders, so you know there's a result. But that doesn't mean you really can isolate the causal variables. Very, very difficult. Digital ads is a little like playing penny slots. We were out in Vegas a couple of years ago, and my daughter gave my wife some money to play the slots. She said, just put it in. And my wife said, I'm going to go to the penny slots because then I can play a long time. I said, do you want to win or not? She said, well, I'd like to win. I said, the more you play, the less likely you are to win. Right? Because the odds are in the favor of the casino. You see this big building? That's what happens. Okay? The odds are in the favor of the casino. The way you win is play once. Then you can get lucky. I said, I'd go find a dollar machine. Might win big. And find one with an arm on it, because you might as well enjoy yourself while you're pulling the slot machine instead of just this button thing. So she did. And she got a 900% return on investment. And she was so excited. So digital ads can cover a lot of waterfront, but it's really hard to win because you don't know which is generating the most efficient ROI, fundamentally. As John Wanamaker once said, half my advertising is wasted. I just wish I knew which half. Okay, so now, and Martin doesn't go into a lot of depth in how to solve it, but, basically says there is no silver bullet. 10 years ago, there were promises of a silver bullet, but you hear a lot of articles about how we're going to understand it if we have enough artificial intelligence. And, for the last 10 years, we've been hearing about big data, and big data is going to solve everything. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about AI, because we want to get into the machine learning aspect of this, and big data. Gartner Group actually says 87% of AI projects fail to achieve ROI at all. Not that they lose money. They don't even try. They don't even get to the starting line, much less the finish line. 87%. One reason is spurious correlations. People think with more data, they're going to have more certainty. That's not what happens. What happens is you get correlations of things that are complete nonsense. So if you take pi out to 20 gig digits, which they're right around now, and you take a random number generator to 20 gig digits, you'll find whole long strings that correlate. They'll match exactly. What does it tell you? Absolutely nothing. Here's a correlation of deaths caused by X-ray contrast media correlated with bicyclists killed in collisions with 2 or 3-wheeled motor vehicles. It's an 88% correlation. What does it mean? Nothing. About 80% of what I do as a modeler, because I work with hundreds of variables, is ignore the silly correlations. At least I can see what they are. One of the biggest problems that we've lost sight of is that most machine learning requires a labeled data set. You've probably seen these. It says, "Are you human?" and brings this up. And you think it's to verify that you're human. That is not what's going on here. Not at all. It says, "Where are the traffic lights?" You click here and here. Now, a computer, if they've been trained a bit, might recognize this as a traffic light. It's vertical rectangle. It's got some lights on it. It's on a pole. These are also traffic lights, and it probably won't get those because there's no lights on it. They're facing the wrong way. But if you're a self-driving car and you're pulling up behind this truck, you're going to see these traffic lights way before you're going to see these, right? So if you can let a human teach the self-driving car with millions and millions of pictures where the traffic lights are, when they're coming to an intersection, they might slow down. Instead of plowing into this suddenly turns red, plowing into the back of the truck. When IBM wanted to teach Watson how to play Jeopardy, they had 127,000 Jeopardy questions. So they could measure. Put the algorithm together, look for the proper nouns, look for the negations, blah, blah, blah. Load it up with data and see what it did. And then they'd find, sarcastic questions or nuanced questions. And eventually they got it really good, right? That's what they did. But it was from the labeled data set. One of the problems in digital, as we've already touched on, is if you don't know who saw the ad, crowdsourcing, yeah, that's exactly right. It's crowdsourcing the machine training. Actually, when you first saw those CAPTCHA, remember those weird looking words that were kind of blurry? Those were actually from scans of books. And the guys who invented CAPTCHA were selling those corrections to the book scanners so that they could know what that word really was and didn't have to rely on, a bad image of a book. See how you learn things on these shows. I got all kinds of goofy stories. Okay, so we already touched on it. We touched on that labeled data set. And this is where mail has big advantages. Let's talk about a few of them. Okay, bing. Sappi, the paper company, commissioned some studies, and they found from neuroscientists, they found that your brain has 10 times more touch than vision processing. And these things have been updated more lately, and they've actually gotten into the tactile side of direct mail. It forces engagement. So the other day, I think Monday, I got a mailer from Stamps.com. I don't want Stamps.com. I don't care about Stamps.com. But I can tell you that it was a pretty nice mailer. Yesterday, I got a mask in the mail. What a cool mailer. I got a lot of likes on that post. I remember it. I can't think of one digital ad, and I'm sure I've seen probably dozens, if not hundreds, in the last 3 days. But I can remember those 2 mailers, and I can tell you what I got in the mail today, too. Mailbox isn't full right now. But you have to engage with it because it will pile up. It's junk mail. It will pile up. So you have to deal with it. You have to look at it. You have to touch it. You have to at least make a judgment about where it's going next. In the 80s, only about half the households in America did remote buying. You know, people, heck, even in northern Wisconsin right now, in the last few years, only 60% have credit cards. but you know, mostly that's gone out. It's more like 100%, but it's not, because I did a study for a cell phone company up there not too long ago. So the mailbox is less full, readership is up. Now you know almost every household, I'm not saying that every household you should target, but every household has the capability of buying remote. It's the golden age of mail. And, you know, I've shown this slide before on some presentations, but people think mail is expensive. But the truth is that, you know, Google, this was from Ad Week, I believe, an Ad Week study using the cost of a florist ad, you know, flowers at Valentine's or something. And they estimated $5 per click. But the standard bounce rate, according to Google, is 50%. Now you say, well, we'll have a landing page. Well, then it's 80% bounce, which means that your cost per engaged visitor is $10 to $25. I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm not saying it doesn't work. But after you get the engaged visitor, your response rate often is not any better, if as good, as mail figuring the entire mailing list. So the costs are deceptive in digital because it looks like it's so inexpensive. It's like TV. You know, I was actually hired by USPS to teach their first direct mail sales force the economics of mail, how the CFO thinks. And one of them came up to me in the hall in the middle of the course and said, why would anybody spend $500 $1,000, that's 50 cents per piece. Those were the days. And when you could reach your audience with TV for $20 $1,000. It's a pretty good question. And that's what we did. We answered that question. So, you know, don't automatically assume that digital is a great deal. Mail isn't. I would argue that anybody with more than a few tens of thousands of customers should be using mail no matter what. And so we'll talk a little bit about selling mail, because I know some of you are from print companies, and obviously USPS people are here too. Okay, so let's look at the case studies. I know you've been waiting for case studies. Okay, Musician's Friend was owned by Guitar Center, and Guitar Center was a big retailer, and basically the people there, you know, we got feedback that said any guitar that's sold through the mail is one that isn't getting sold through the store. So they didn't like the mail at all. They just didn't. And they were owned by a company in Dubai or a venture group or something. I actually got to meet one of those guys one time, and he said, why are we spending millions and millions of dollars to put these catalogs in the mail? So we tested it. We can test it, right? That was a big deal. So we said, okay, let's carefully select the people that we would be mailing, and we'll not mail a couple of them, like 30,000 of them. They were doing pretty big drops. That wasn't 10%. And so what we found was the ones that hadn't been mailed just across the board, that segment of customers did about $12. Believe this is revenue per piece. Should have labeled it. Whereas the ones that did get mailed were okay, Dave. You probably should do more. What we're hoping is you can get your customers to mail more. That's what we're really talking about here. Because I don't know where you are located, but I was talking to somebody in print yesterday, and they were in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I said, there's probably 100 .coms within 50 miles of Dallas, Fort Worth that have 100,000 customers or more and aren't doing any mail. And that's the real mission field that we want to go after. We want to show them that this, good. We want to show them that this is possible. This insight is possible with mail. That's very, very difficult. That's very, very difficult to figure out in digital. Okay, so, and here's a 3-month holdout test where the people that got mailed were worth $60 on average. The people that didn't get mailed were $38. So, huge return on investment. We did 6 of those tests, one every year that we were working with them. In addition, we did 11 head-to-head tests with other modeling companies. 6 different modeling companies. 11 tests. Actually, I think it was 8 modeling companies. 6 years, 500,000 pieces per test, and our average win was 64%. We won them all. In fact, the last one was against some University of Southern California or something. Their faculty plus the Guitar Center people who were convinced, that they could beat what we were doing. And we beat them by 321% on a uniques test, which I'll explain a little bit later. But they actually, I didn't even know they were doing this. And I found out from my friend Travis Seaton, who was in, modeling companies. Not RFM, modeling companies. I found out from Travis Seaton that they'd accused us of cheating because there was no way that somebody could beat them by 321%. Well, we did. And there's some reasons, and we'll touch on those as well. Bullock and Jones, I used to go to the DMA show every year, and Eric Goodwill would buy me dinner at fancy places. I said to him, Eric, you shouldn't be buying me dinner. You should, I'm the vendor. He said, John, they actually had our system on site. John, every time we do a mailing with your system, it finds 20% more mailable names. And you're overall, against our RFM, which they kept improving as they learned with the system, we did 10 times better in sales per book. 1,000% improvement. Okay? And they sold out to Saks Fifth Avenue. And we're not going to talk about that too much. And then Eric ended up back with it again. I was involved with a legal case with Toys R Us. This is a few years ago now, so I'm not worried about mentioning it. But basically, it revolved around the new owners of Toys R Us, who had told investors that they were going to do database marketing, and for that reason, they were going to revolutionize the retail industry. They went out to big database companies around the country and said, the sky's the limit. Tell us what you can do for us. They didn't call us at the time. Might have helped them. But it was really eye-opening to me, first to see what they were going to pay or what these companies were charging, who weren't even including significant modeling. And Toys R Us didn't have a really good way to leverage the modeling anyway. They did some mailings, but it was basically freestanding inserts to drive traffic to the stores. That's not what we're talking about in mail. But anyway, what I learned was that investors care about the insights of machine learning, and their valuation went up. Now, sadly, they didn't know what they were doing, and so the valuation went back down. But it wasn't really the fault of the pitch as much as the execution of it, and that's what I was involved in as an expert witness. One of the challenges we've had is that we have dramatically increased growth, profit, and company valuation for our clients. And so 7 times at least, these are ones that came to mind, the companies were sold after working with us closely. Again, remember, the CEO wants to improve the valuation, and when a company goes from slowly shrinking to suddenly growing dramatically, the valuation changes. It's worth a lot of money. And so the company can get sold and can find buyers much more easily. And so I've mentioned a couple of these, but we've had a tremendous track record in terms of helping companies. We didn't mean it at the time. Most of the time, they didn't mention to the new buyers how valuable we'd been, because that could affect your valuation. But the bottom line on it is we made the owners a lot of money. And that's kind of what we're after. We really are after helping and having success. But if you're in print circulation, or if you're at the USPS, the real danger in machine learning is that almost all machine learning sales pitches go something like, we'll cut the waste out of your advertising. We'll cut the waste out of your mailing and pay for it that way. You know what that means? It means circulation will shrink. Sounds like Western Publishing, doesn't it? Western Publishing, the one that stopped sending the books and went bankrupt. They went right out of business. It only took them a few years. And I learned that from one of their circulation people who saw the handwriting on the wall and left. Let's talk a little bit about Lovesac. This is one of my favorite case studies. We started working on circulation in 2014. A consultant had come in and said, you should have a catalog. And they hired a new VP of marketing who wondered about the value of mail. He'd come from a packaged goods company, and he had really no experience. And he said, John, why would we send a catalog that essentially reiterates or explains what we do to people who've already bought from us and know what we do? Our biggest problem is people don't know what we do. Wouldn't it be better to spend all our money on getting new customers and informing them about our company? You know, it made a ton of sense. I couldn't argue. It did. But rather than agree with him and fire myself and shut the catalog down, I said, Patrick, we got to test that. He said, how would you do that? And I said, the way we do it is we'll take several thousand customers that we were planning to mail, and we'll not mail them. And we'll look at the sales for all those compared with the overall sales. See how they do. The same thing we did for Musician's Friend. He said, that's worth it. Let's try it. See what happens. We also found that web customers tended to be near the store. They had spent a lot of money on digital, and they were hoping. They had about 80 stores in the major metros around the country. They were hoping that they could expand and grow with digital instead of opening new stores, because it's difficult, expensive, problematic to get them up and running and then to make them profitable. So here's what happened on the holdout testing. As we refined it, and there were some steps in the process, we got a 900% return on investment. Especially when we included the near neighbors. Because what seemed to be happening was their customers would hand the catalog off to their neighbors who asked about where they got the furniture. And the neighbor would come in and buy. The other thing we did was we started testing what drove traffic to the stores. We started doing just postcards, really, really simple, with different offers, different benefits. Simple, straightforward stuff. And what we found was, out of the 4 offers that they were using, that were all over their website, only one was really compelling to customers. So we started going with that. Then what happened was, because it was some of the mailings were so profitable, they were actually told about retargeting with mail. That's not something we've done. We have some partners that can do it. But the idea was that they were already doing TV. They took what we learned in mail and applied it to the TV advertising and retooled that. And then that drove traffic to the web. And then when they visited the web, we were able to get their street address, send them a mailing piece to get them to come to the store. And that launched their big growth. So they went from 75 million in sales to 100 million in sales in 1 year. Pretty good, huh? And this is public information. Eric, who I work closely with, presented it at NMOA a couple of years ago. And after his presentation, he came over and said, "John, you've taught us so much." And but they went public.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
This shot we just got. The shot we just got might be the one.
This is the CEO.
What do you do at Lovesac?
We work as a team to grow the business.
Biggest growth year of Lovesac ever, at least in modern history. Honestly, I would say most of it is due to these guys. Like the marketing department at Lovesac has, and you know the way that they've strategized and then spent money very carefully with really great returns has driven this business to like whole new level.
Yeah,
no joke. And
that was the CEO, founder, talking about the marketing team and how good they were at figuring out what was working and where to spend money and get the return on investment. And their growth was astronomical. You know, because this was not a startup. This was a well-established company, and they did this basically without opening any stores. They remodeled some of the stores, but that's what it's capable of doing. Now, just for a second, I want to explain the relationship between acquisition and retention. Most companies, if they wanted to grow, if they wanted to reestablish, sales that are down right now, if they're a retailer, they'll think, we got to spend more money getting new customers. And there's some merit to that. That was what Patrick came in to do. And because the outgoing president said, all we need to do is keep retargeting our current customers and sell them more items. And that comes from a Harvard Business Review article from about 30 years ago, where it says it's always easier to sell something new to an existing customer than to find new customers. It's not always true. Not even close. Especially if the new items you're trying to sell aren't the same margin as your manufactured items, and their prices are 30% more than Wayfair for the exact same item. That can cost you customers. So think of your customer file or your client's customer file as a bathtub, and you've got a certain number of customers in here, and I have to say the machine learning works best when you've got like 100,000 customers in a drop. That's a good ballpark rule of thumb. Okay? But what's happening is there's a certain number in here, You don't know who's leaving because they don't call and tell you. So you spend money up here putting new customers into the bathtub. Okay? Now, what the modeling does is it teaches you which customers by which characteristics are most likely to buy, or even more likely, which are the least likely to buy again. It is better at ruling out than ruling in. But it also shows you anomalies about what's going on, what's the hot buttons, what isn't. Okay? This is a great tool for selectronic bindery type technology. Quad uses demo bind. There were some Quad people registered. Donnelly called it selectronic bindery. The idea of versioning. You know, you've got your digital presses and you want to make new offers, but the problem is most merchants don't know which offer to make to whom. And so they're just throwing it at the wall. They don't really get what's going on. Whereas with modeling, you can start to isolate different markets. You can find little markets that can be capitalized on, and that's where you get explosive growth. We did another case study. Last summer, almost exactly a year ago today, we offered AI 90 days guaranteed. AI ROI 90 days guaranteed. And so we started August 1st with a client and several titles. We did a holiday model, we did a winter model, and we did a spring model. Okay? And here's, I'm not going to tell you who, but it's, you know, it's a recognized catalog title. This is not the differential. This is the gross margin per piece and the net ROI on the modeling cost. So if you take the profitability differential on the uniques test, the modeling paid for itself and about 70% profit, return on investment profit on the first drop. Gross margin per piece was 150% higher on the modeled pieces. That's isolating the little guys in the bathtub. We did it better. On the winter, it was 199% better on gross margin per piece, and the return on investment was better. In spring, we hit 350% return on investment on a relatively small mailing. That's what this can do. This right here can change the valuation of your company. That's what the CEO's after. That's what got Lovesac to go public. They all of a sudden had explosive growth. Now, I just want to give you a little history, and then we're pretty much done for the day. I gave my first talk, New York Hilton, New York City, 1982. I put up the spreadsheets. I asked, who's using computers in marketing? No hands went up. I said, who has a computer in their marketing department? 2 hands out of maybe 35 people. I think it was More Business Products and maybe LL Bean or somebody. Anyway, in 94, we used one of the first 5 Pentiums off the line for NCR, and we're able to load 250 million transactions in a fully relational database product. No one had ever done it before. IBM hired us, Microsoft. I taught modeling at or marketing and modeling for USPS. And we built Adobe's first marketing database. We also built the Hudson Bay's first. That was for this one. That was for Hudson Bay Company and Zellers. We've had 70 catalog clients over the years. And the reason I'm mentioning this is just because if you introduce your clients to me, it's not, you probably haven't heard of me before, but we've been around. We have a track record of success. We did Cabela's the first time they ever sent data out to anybody. It included the credit card numbers and expiration dates of the customer file. We said, no, we'd rather you just kept those at your company back in those days. They said, well, we've never sent our data to anybody else. Dick doesn't like computers. Dick was great. I learned a lot from Dick. Anyway, Baseball Express, we took from 5 million to 50 million over 10 years. Tiny little company. They called us up the first time we did a model. They said, what did you do? I said, yeah, what? They said, we got triple the response rate we've ever seen. Like I said, Musician's Friend had 11 tests over 6 years, 321%. And 15 times we've seen explosive growth in applying these techniques to companies. So there's two paths. One is to keep mailing and pray. The other is all digital. But AI for ROI and insight is really the path you want to go on. And I'm not saying that our machine learning is the best platform. It's just a proven platform. People are going to come along that are going to beat what we do eventually. But when you're tiptoeing into this world of machine learning and AI, you don't want to invent the system while you're also trying to prove it and justify it and get a return on investment. You want to work with something proven, so the only big variables are your data itself, your customers, your offers. Okay? How do we start? We have very clear goals. We have an ROI target. We want to beat what you're doing by 20% or we're done. We generate a labeled data set. What Mail does, I spent 3 years trying to figure out why I could be modeling for 25 years and nobody else seems to make it work. And then it hit me. Mail, we mail to the house and we ship to the house. We can tell the people that ordered what part of the mailing list they came from. We can analyze all of that with hundreds of variables. We can analyze what they bought, what they looked like before we mailed them, and who responded, and we can figure out why. It doesn't happen in digital. There is no labeled data set, but it's baked into mail. It's part of the process. We mail to the house. You have to have engagement. We know you saw it, and we ship to the house. So we know who ordered and who did not order but did see it. And that's how the thing works. Now, in addition, we also have 5 steps to make sure we don't put, our average client puts 500,000 pieces in the mail or 200,000 pieces in the mail. That's real. You don't want to make a mistake on this. So we have a 5-step proven system, including, most importantly, real-world validation. Most modelers don't do this. Most modelers will say, oh, we did a back test, and our system beats what he's doing. Yeah, that's right. You've left in all the spurious correlations, whereas you're comparing to what I pulled out and cleaned up because I want it to work in the mail. Anyway, I learned a lot. RFM has 3 main variables. Regression has about 12, and AI could be infinite. It could be 4,000. But they aren't equally valuable. The more variables you get, the less value any one of them has, because though we call them independent variables, they're really not. They're really all, to some degree, collinear and correlated with each other. So we use a product. We have a version that's just specially written for us, and we know how to work it. And it's fully transparent. So these are transparent, and that's great, but they miss the nuances. What we do is we take this concept and we find the good in the bad and the bad in the good. And that makes all the difference in those unique tests, where we compare the two methodologies, and that's where we get our wins. We like it if you have about 100,000 active 0 to 12-month buyers. We use mail for maximum engagement. So if you're a .com and you're watching this, or if you're a printer and you want to get a .com involved, we can do that. We can help. We have lots of partners. I have friends that I've worked with for decades on getting people in the mail, but it takes a little more than the 90 days if they've never been in the mail before. Okay? We have a 20%, if it doesn't do better than 20%, then, RFM, thanks Dave. RFM is recency frequency monetary. Shade is chi-squared automatic interaction detector, and I missed the last one. And it doesn't matter. Everybody wants to compare techniques, but as John Worth, who recently passed away, taught me, he had a PhD in direct mail. He said, when there's lumps in the soup, anybody can find them. So it's not about the technique. It's about how much experience do you have of the technique? How much experience do you have in the real world? We've done literally thousands of models. So we set up a 3-year contract, but if we don't win, if we don't beat what you're doing by at least 20%, but you saw the last one, that was more like 200%, then we walk away. So 3 months, 2 months to build the thing, a month to build the model, and then we're in the mail. There we go. We guarantee that you'll have an ROI. We may not win. We haven't not won, but we could not win. But at least you'll know for sure what the ROI is. And that's something that almost 90% of the modelers are not delivering at all. So what to say to your CEO? Would you like 20% growth right now? You know, we're just doing a poll today while I speak. And it's the biggest poll we've had in about 2 years for a mailer. Good size, big, the kind of run most printers couldn't even handle. And that's great. That's what we see. We've seen it over and over, year after year, decade after decade, through thick and thin. The other thing is, would you like to prove which part of your marketing is most effective? Our system is actually designed to spot anomalies, to spot weird stuff, to spot groups of customers that, you know, live in weird areas or that bought certain products that are flags for high return rates or other issues. Would you like to spot hidden growth opportunities? That's the one that really launches it. And I've got a bunch of stories of that in my book, Spinning Straw into Gold, which is available on Kindle, Amazon, even in paperback. That's what ignites growth. Growth is not ignited by tweaking, by turning little knobs. That doesn't happen. Explosive growth happens by a new business idea, a new concept, an untapped market that suddenly you can pivot toward. You know that's true. We spot opportunities. Do we beat what you're doing now? Sure. That's not where the money is. The money is in this third part, and that's what the CEOs are looking for. That's what happened at Lovesac. That's what happened at Adobe, where we doubled their circulation from 500,000 pieces per month to 1 million, and the revenue per piece went up 74% in 6 months. Just leave that one sit. So remember that. AI 90 days, AI ROI 90 days guaranteed. Direct mail ain't dead. Not only is direct mail not dead, direct mail is the most cutting edge marketing you can do. Nobody else is saying that. I haven't heard this message from any other speaker anywhere ever. If you want to do machine learning, and you should, I can remember the first time I modeled, I could not, I didn't believe in it. How could we handle, thanks for buying the book. It's a quick read. I'll send you if you write me, I'll send you the audio version in the author's own words. I think I do a really good job with Rumpelstiltskin. Anyway, so that's my offer for today. Buy the book and I will send you the audio version. Not available on Amazon or anywhere else. So if your company is interested in tippy-toeing into machine learning, or your clients are interested, what could be better than a guaranteed ROI quantification of the machine learning? What could be better? We are going to guarantee that we get to ROI. We're not going to dink around. We know what we're after. It's not data mining. There's a big hill. There must be something valuable. But it's data sluicing. We know we're looking for the gold. We have a machine that's found it consistently for 25 years, and we're going to find it for your clients, and we're going to help them grow. Mail can do this. It's baked into mail. Labeled data set is baked into mail. Spinning Straw into Gold is the name of the book. You know, again, write me and I will email you the links. You know, I'm really, really easy to find on LinkedIn, or, well, obviously you found me here. So I think if you type Miglosh just about anywhere, you'll get me, and probably get the book coming up. But mail, this message needs to be shouted by USPS. It needs to be shouted by the print community. Mail is the most cutting-edge technology for marketing in the world. Mail plus machine learning. But we've been doing the machine learning for 25 years, and they still haven't figured that out in digital. And it's going to be tough. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying somebody won't figure it out. I'm actually working on a patent right now. But it's all built on what we learn in mail. So if you have any specific questions, chime in. I thank you for hanging with me this long. What? The name of the book, Spinning Straw into Gold. You want to grab one on the shelf? I'll hold it up so they can see what it looks like. It's over there. My style consultant. That's it right there. There it is. This is what it looks like. I think you gave me the book. Yeah, I might have. Sometimes if you join Wisconsin DMA, WDMA.org, sometimes I throw a book in as part of the membership. I'm not even sure that the credit card works right now because we haven't tried it. But would love it if you wanted to join or rejoin. Right. Hey, Scott. That's Scott Hansen. He's texting me. That's not fair. They pop up. I can't get away. Yeah, Scott, have you pitched this to anybody out there in the real world? You know, you're on the edge of Chicago, and there's .coms in Chicago. There's big people. I hope I can. I certainly can make the deck available. I hope that I can make the video available. That's it right there. And it's written for your CEOs, right? It's written for your CEOs and your CFOs to understand why this works, why it will generate ROI, why it'll beat what you're doing now, most likely. So all those questions are very simply answered. And the funny part, of course, is that I need to visit again, he says. Go down to Chicago. That's fine. You know, we could do another show and do pizza. I've got about 6,000 more LinkedIn connections now, and I can actually email the ones in Chicago Metro. So yeah, we should definitely do that. So yeah, the book starts out with the two big lies in marketing. One, we know who you are, we know all about you, and two, because we know all about you, we can predict what you'll do. You can't even predict you, knowing all you know about you. And so it starts out, I think it's pretty funny. Bob Stone said, don't change a word of it. He said, this is the first book I've ever read that I would just say, let's go. This is great. He recommended me to his publisher. They wouldn't publish it. They said, well, you kind of explain why most marketers who go through school in journalism or something get it wrong. We sell textbooks. We can't sell this. They won't buy our textbooks. Anyway, so but I did help with Bob's book. I helped write 2 chapters. I get an acknowledgement in one of the versions, version 6 or 7 or 8, somewhere in there. Best-selling book in direct marketing, and I got to help, and that was great. I got a nice letter from Bob. But again, they didn't use most of what I wrote because it was inflammatory. So we'll continue being inflammatory. Any more questions? These people are harassing me. This works. And if you're a printer or if you're a USPS, you explain this to your clients. I'm working with one of the senior salespeople out west of here, a couple states west, and we're trying to work with a company that's doing 2.5 million or something catalogs a year. They don't know who's getting them. They don't know what's going on. They could do this. They just need to structure it right. But if there's no intervention, it's very likely that's going away because they don't understand what they got. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for... Oh, great. Another one. Hey, Rich. You missed most of it. Must have the time wrong or something. We're working on a system to get the time on the calendar. But if I stop talking, I can try and get the recording set up, and I'll email everybody who registered a link for that recording once I get it edited down a little bit. Anything specifics, Kate, that I should touch on? I'm exhausted. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Rich. I hope you got to see most of it. Share it. Well, once we get it out, I hope you can share it with other people, because I know what it's like. You know, even when I go to a webinar that's live, I sit there doing email and writing proposals and doing whatever else I have to do, and I probably miss half of it. So I always like to get the recording, and so fingers crossed we'll have a recording. I went pretty fast. Always feel free to write. We're gonna resurrect the. Thank you. Is it Jamie? I think. Thank you, Jamie. We're gonna try and open the WDMA for membership again, because it really helps to get your support to put these kind of things together. And if you visit my daily live stream, you will hear story after story after story. And we've got almost 600 videos up on YouTube now. I've got some good playlists over there. That's Miglosh Marketing on YouTube. Just search for Miglosh Marketing, and you can see the playlists. I'm committed to mail till I can't do it anymore. We've got to pass this along to the next generation. Mail not only ain't dead. Somebody wrote me and said, you shouldn't be talking about mail and dead in the same sentence. Well, it got a lot of views. Like 1,100 views on a post on LinkedIn 2 weeks ago. But not only isn't it dead, it's the most cutting edge marketing today. When you marry it with machine learning, when you understand what you're working with, nobody does. Thanks for visiting. I'm going to sign off now. Have a great day. Like and share. Your friends will think you're smart. Oh, your friends will know you're smart. Kate had me change it. It may be available on Periscope as soon as I stop talking, because it's just a little iffy on Periscope, but it probably will. So that link may be workable, and I'll try to edit that one first. Have a great day. Bye-bye.